Hello, I'm your host, Effie Pilarino, and today I'm delighted to connect with another distinguished, wonderful lady, Dr. Jane Thomason. Jane is a friend from the times of, I guess, pre-COVID, Jane, right?
Yeah, we last saw each other in March 2020, just before the borders all shut.
Yeah, when you were spearheading a big blockchain summit, right, in London, and here we are today. You are the inaugural chair of the Metaverse World Council, or World Metaverse Council, that we will definitely discuss about. You are very much involved in the metaverse. You are also on the editorial board of the journal of metaverse and the frontiers in blockchain. So you've authored books on these topics. We'll talk about your activities. First of all, tell us, where are you today as you are traveling a lot? You're not in the virtual world. Where are you physically?
No, I'm very happy to tell you I'm in Mauritius, the beautiful island of Mauritius. And yesterday they had their Cryptoverse Summit, and I was thrilled to be a speaker there and meet all the people from Mauritius. And of course, it's the gateway to Africa.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, Mauritius, I know Mauritius more with my fintech hat. And you know, since you were yesterday at this crypto conference, I can't help but ask you, you know, I was at a metaverse conference here in Zurich at the PwC Academy yesterday. It was a whole day event, and I walked away with this question of, okay, the metaverse and Web3, it's all blurring, the lines are blurring. So obviously there isn't a very clear definition, but maybe some people have clarity or have their own understanding. Can you tell us what you see or define as the metaverse versus Web3, and whether your definition differs from others?
Look, I'd be really happy to do that. But just before I do, because I'm in Mauritius, I want to tell people something that not everyone knows about. Mauritius has very clearly defined law and regulations around digital assets. This is a very good place to come and set up in a regulated environment if you're looking for a jurisdiction that's not on the FATF grey list and has got really clear laws and regulations for digital assets. So I learned a lot about that yesterday, and it's very impressive. So I just want to fit that in case people are listening, because I don't think it's well known that Mauritius is so advanced in terms of digital asset regulation. But moving on to the metaverse, and I think there is a lot of confusion. So let me explain to you the way that I see it. So first of all, it's a persistent, always on immersive environment which has its own economy, and we can discuss later about whether that's powered by crypto or not. And people are able to do a whole lot of different activities in the metaverse, usually using something called avatars, which are kind of digital representations of people. And they can lend, borrow, exchange, and interact with people in that immersive environment. So that's the way that I see it. But I think the way I see it, we have four kind of groups of people who are looking at the metaverse in slightly different ways. So the reason that it got so popular, if you like, was Mark Zuckerberg's announcement about Meta. I'm investing all this money, we're building the metaverse. And all the big techs are investing in AR, VR, metaverse-like experiences. But that won't be peer-to-peer, that won't be decentralized. They're going to use the same models as they use now, which is the sort of extractive data models, but they're going to offer their customers some sort of immersive experience, which many of their customers will enjoy because it'll be easy for them to access. So I think that's the first kind of group of metaverses. The second is gaming. And you would be aware there's nearly 3 billion gamers worldwide. It's a huge industry and it's growing. And gaming already has many of the characteristics of a Web3 metaverse in that they buy and sell assets and they have gamification and incentivization and so forth. But many games are still Web2 games, and they're probably going to stay Web3 games, Web2 games. Some Web3 companies like Sandbox and Decentraland are developing Web3 games, and some Web2 games are starting to take in, if you like, the blockchain ecosystem and becoming Web3. But I think that's where the big movement is, and that's where the big networks are. The third one are these Web3 companies that deliberately set out to build Web3 environments, like Decentraland. Illuvium's another one that's a company, and Sandbox and others.
What does Illuvium do? I'm not familiar.
What's interesting about, because one of the criticisms of gamers about re-gaming is that the gameplay is not interesting. I mean, yes, you can go in there and you can do things with tokens, but it's not fun and engaging and captivating like some of the Web2 games. So Illuvium is set itself out to be, it's in Germany, a Web3 company that is starting with the same level of sophistication of gameplay of the Web2 games, but it's bringing in the sort of Web3 experience. And there was another one, when I was at Consensus 2 weeks ago in Texas, I actually moderated a fireside chat with someone, Kevin Mitty from Rush Universe, which is a variant of the play to earn games, a metaverse game in India, and he's got 500,000 active users a month. So there are some really interesting things going on in the Web3 gaming space, but also with other Web3 companies that are trying to attract commerce or trying to attract entertainment and so forth. So there are those companies who are building the open, free, fair metaverse. And then the last one, I give it its own category, but I might change my mind in a year or two's time, is government, because we have the City of Seoul who are offering their services in the metaverse, and they've said they're going to offer all of their services in the metaverse within a year or two. Dubai has got a metaverse strategy, and it's set up its regulator in, I think, Decentraland. And NEOM in Saudi Arabia is building $1 billion metaverse. So we're starting to see other cities and governments follow suit. So I think we're going to see metaverses which are around provision of services by government. But just on to the, back to the definition of metaverse, for me, ideally, the metaverse I want to see is a Web3 metaverse. So it's an immersive Web3 experience.
Yes, but not controlled by, it's not a closed system like, the big tech companies that are currently really organizing and dominating Web2 and the internet from our digital identity, basically, on the internet to everything else, right? So it's not only about that, it's also about, I guess, Web3 beyond the gaming, the metaverse, and these immersive experiences, also about sharing revenues and having that distribution of revenues to the creators and the users and the participants. But in your initial sort of description of the metaverse, you said something that I'm not clear. You said that it's always on. What does that mean? Like, is it like?
So it sort of means, like, let's say you're in a collaboration space and you've got a digital twin that you were talking about, and maybe you've got some presentations that you were discussing with other people. You can leave that space and go away and come back, and your digital twin and your presentations and things will still be there. You don't have to kind of recreate the experience. You pick up where you left off.
Okay, I understand. Okay.
And it means like 24 hours a day. It's like DeFi. 24 hours a day, anyone anywhere in the world can enter a given metaverse and can be interacting in that metaverse. So it's never off. I mean, you might not be in it, but the metaverse itself is
There.
continuing.
Yeah. The space is there. And how does that connect with blockchain and crypto? I mean, for now, it seems to me that, as you mentioned, gaming is definitely where it's kind of the first entry point, or the adoption, or where we are seeing naturally more growth. Maybe education is another space, or fashion, I'm hearing also, or seeing, whether it's Nike or other commerce, as you mentioned. But all those can work without crypto, I guess, or there's no blockchain.
Well, I think
there.
it's your point, Effie, that you were making. It's about, Web3 is basically the next iteration of the internet. It is open, it is free, it is accessible to all. People get rewarded for the efforts that they put or for what they create within the metaverse. So it allows this distribution of value and sharing of value on a peer-to-peer basis. So everything about blockchain is the new iteration of the internet, and then metaverse just makes it immersive. So within metaverse economies, but I want to particularly talk about health and education, because I think these are massive use cases for metaverse. But let's just talk about education for a minute, because, think about the need to skill people up for these new skills that are needed in the digital economy. And there are shortages of all sorts of workforce categories, and then there are people who are being made redundant or partly redundant through ChatGPT. So we're going into an era where people are going to have to constantly reskill. So let's say, talking about the metaverse, and Unity is one of the platforms that people build their metaverse platforms on. There's not enough people who know how to develop in Unity. So you can develop skills-based programs for people, that people can come into the metaverse and they can learn, because you're able to track the data, track their performance. You're able to kind of really undertake precision monitoring of what skills they're developing and not. You can pick up when they're not developing the skills and give them micro learning. You can incentivize them with tokens to learn faster, learn more, complete the course so that they come out and be a developer. So with gamification and incentivization, I think we're really going to change the way people learn. And an important point I want to make, I was reading the US Bureau of Labor and Statistics, 60% of the new jobs won't require university degrees. So I think things like metaverse education, which is very skills-based, you can work on digital twins, you can learn every aspect, even to be a technician for a solar farm. You can learn that on digital twins in the metaverse. So I think this will be the future of education for skills, and it's going to make it so much more interesting for children to learn, because they can have immersive experiences. They're learning about the solar system, about ancient Rome, and they can go there. They can experience it. They can ask questions. And so I think the way we educate our children is going to be enhanced enormously by metaverse-like experiences.
Yeah, when I think, Jane, of the omniverse that NVIDIA has designed, and I think of how I was educated around, for example, geography, memorizing whatever river names and this and that and the other, and you can have immersive experiences and understand Earth. You can understand history. You can experience so many other immersive projects. We've been talking about project-led education, and it exists, but it's really in a two-dimensional world, right? On paper and so on. It's really very, very exciting. And at the same time, of course, with all the challenges that come with this digitalization, not only of cybersecurity, but many challenges around ethics. And I know that you're passionate about that. I want to hear, some thoughts. I know that you're even developing a course around this. So tell us more about this topic.
Look, I'm really happy to, because I think that the difference between ethics in an analog world and ethics in the digital world is that, you and I can discuss an ethical issue between ourselves as it pertains to 5 people who've applied for a loan. And we can make a decision based on a range of characteristics that we decide which of those 5 people should get the loan. But what's happening now is that decision is becoming codified, if you like, in an algorithm and then applied to large groups of people. And so you could be inadvertently creating, real impact on people at scale, because it's not just one decision. You can make a wrong decision about one person, but to make a wrong decision about 1 million people is much more powerful. And then the board and the CEO are usually not proximate to those decisions. It's the coders and the engineers who are building the algorithms who know what's in the algorithms, and they're not trained in ethics. They're not necessarily thinking about the social consequences of what they're doing. So I think we're going to be faced with a lot of new challenges to think about in terms of ethics. But in terms of, let's just think about the metaverse for a minute, because one of the issues with metaverse that I see as a problem, because I personally don't think Oculus data sets is going to be the long-term future of the metaverse, but let's stay with that. But there's an Oculus goggles that you're wearing that's collecting data about your responses and what you're doing and where you're going, but it's probably connected to a wearable that you have, and it's possibly connected to some other IoT devices that you're using. So you're getting data collected about you from many more data points than has ever been available before. So first of all, that's an issue in relation to consent. And then that becomes an issue in relation to data privacy and security. And even things like when people start, and that's why I think Web3 is so important, but let's just imagine we're in a Web2 metaverse. They get your response data to metaverses. They can track your eye movement and your psychological responses. They've got your financial data, they've got your purchasing data, and they've got your health data. They know more about you than you know about yourself, and the ability to be able to manipulate people, for example, and use subversive advertising techniques is really huge. And then, a big issue is going to be about protecting children in the metaverse, because they will be there. I mean, these kids are growing up with, in front of a tablet just about. So, how do we know that it's safe? How do we know that they're talking to other children? How do we know that an immersive, scary experience isn't going to, give them long-term psychological impact? So I think we've got a lot to tease through in metaverses. And even because you were talking about the content creators can be rewarded within a metaverse, but if you're in a metaverse and you create content, who owns the IP? There's all of these questions that haven't been thought about. And if your avatar misbehaves in the metaverse, is it subject to the same laws that you're subject to? So, I could go on for another hour, but I think merely to say we need to be very thoughtful about what the potential benefits are and how we get the most of them, and what the potential harms are and how we protect ourselves and users of these experiences from them. And so that's one of the reasons that we set up the World Metaverse Council, because we were just talking about it in October last year and saying there is nowhere, because it's so new, that you can think about what are the ethical issues? What standards do we need? What taxonomy do we use? How does regulation impact on the metaverse? How can we use it in a positive way for healthcare and for education? What's going on? How can we use it in arts and sciences and entertainment? So we really formed it as a kind of global distributed thought leadership network. That's what I like to call it, because we're crowdsourcing knowledge from all around the world, and we're crowdsourcing the technological innovations from all around the world and bringing it together so that we can share it with people, and we can say, here's the exciting things in health and education, but here's the regulation and standards issues you're going to have to deal with, and here's some of the ethical risks. So we really want to be that kind of go-to place where people come to find that knowledge, and we'll be providing education and all sorts of other things for people who really are interested in being part of the growth of the metaverse, because I'm sure on LinkedIn there's 10,000 metaverse experts. I'm sure none of them are experts. And so, if you need advice about metaverse, where do you go and how are these people accredited? So we want to be able to provide that kind of service as well.
And is the council, the Metaverse Council, joined by industry practitioners, academics, developers? I mean, what's the sort of diversity of those that have
diverse, super diverse. So this is just to say we haven't yet started on industry partnerships because we wanted to get our membership base really strong, and we've gone for as much diversity as we can. So we've got at the moment more than 1,000 members from more than 100 countries. Okay. And in the different countries, we've now started where there are a few people there having meetups and in kind of encouraging them to do information sharing and education. And then we're having we're participating and supporting conferences, but we'll have our first big conference towards the end of the year. We're going to do a substantial metaverse for COP, and we'll be having a conference and awards, and we're starting our academy. So there's a lot going on, and then we will be bringing on corporate partners and industry sponsors and so forth. But we wanted this to be a community-led effort, so we didn't want, because we took money from someone, that they get to drive the agenda. So we wanted to get the community strong before we started partnering with industry and looking for sponsorships and so forth.
And I understand this is relatively new, Jane, right? This metaverse.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really.
Yeah, no, it's new, but it's very fast growing. And I don't think any of us expected it, but it's such an active community. So we have working groups in all of those different areas that are producing policy papers and thought pieces, and some of them are extremely active. And the Open Metaverse group is actively working between metaverses on interoperability, collaborating with people from, at least a dozen different countries. So it's very exciting stuff.
Very interesting. I mean, obviously, me with my fintech hat, I do watch, what the banking or the financial services sector is doing, and definitely they're just scratching the surface. With the JP Morgan having their virtual space and not much activity. I do know that Fidelity is actually quite active training employees internally in their virtual space. And I know that Visa and MasterCard are quite active, in what we know in terms of NFTs and crypto and so on. But they're really, if we think of it, finance is a facilitator towards a means, right? Whether we are buying a home or want to educate, whatever our goals in life is. So I don't expect them to be, in the front line, although they could be involved in shaping issues like digital identity or holding assets, as you said. If you have, a wardrobe in the metaverse, or you own, I don't know, some type of collection that you own, much like you may own a fund. If that is an asset that has value, why not have a bank being the custodian of those assets? So we can see that happening, but I guess they are very slow in stepping into this world, but they do recognize it. I mean, Citi has put out major reports around the metaverse.
Yes, yeah, no, I think the banks are watching with interest, and the banks are also doing research and investigating and thinking about it. I mean, we're off next week to talk to the Arab Monetary Fund about metaverse and how it's relevant to financial services and so forth. So I did a course for the Saudi Central Bank at the end of last year. People want to know about it. I think they're in that discovery phase. And I think certainly banks in different ways are going to look at this, because if you take it back from specifically services, if you think about the consumer of the future, so they're all going to be Gen Z and Gen Y. They're not going to want to go down to their local bank branch and see the bank manager like our generation want to. They're going to want everything on their phone. They're also going to want to be involved in decision making about what kinds of services and products that they receive. And if you think about that whole notion of the community driven and community owned economy that's possible within blockchain, Web3 and metaverse, you know, there the consumers are going to be driving the services and products from the banks, possibly demanding, you know, greater ESG sustainability action by those institutions. And, you know, banks are going to become multi-product centers because they've got a client base. And if they want to keep the client base, clients now don't want to go to one institution for banking, one institution for insurance, one institution for wealth management, one institution for something else. They're going to want everything together, accessible on their mobile phone, money straight into the mobile phone. So I think banks need to think beyond their existing product line and think about what consumers are going to demand of them if they're going to stay in business.
Great. I guess, Jane, I mean, we could be talking for hours on these topics. Before we close, I want to ask you, where can our listeners find you? Is LinkedIn the best place? How can they follow your journeys around the world, and hear from you and learn?
Yeah, please. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I'm very happy to connect with people. Most of the things I do, I post on LinkedIn. Most of my thoughts, I post on LinkedIn, although I have to be careful. This is it's not a funny story. I recently completed a book that's going to be published on Web3. And when I first submitted it, it came back and said that it had some amount of plagiarism in it. And I went and said, what is that? And it was my LinkedIn post that I'd included in the book. So if it's been published before, even on LinkedIn, and you republish it somewhere else, it's plagiarism. So I learnt that. And so I'm cautious about how many ideas I put on LinkedIn at what level of depth. But anyway, that's a funny story. But yeah, please follow me on LinkedIn.
Great, Jane. I will share with our listeners in the description of our video. Thank you so much. And for sharing these insights. I mean, this is a space that is evolving continuously, and I'm sure if we speak again in a couple of months, there'll be new trends and ideas, and you know, the evolution is just at a pace that we can't even keep up, right?
Yeah, it's breathtaking. Thank you so much. Great to talk to you.